Okay, welcome. Welcome, everyone. Yeah, we're in for a beautiful treat now. Very profound experience. Well, we just watched the Lion King this morning, and what a heartwarming experience. Did everyone enjoy it? Seeing it with new eyes. Interesting metaphysics. Being told that you murdered your father, having guilt, being told to run away, and then after much absence from your origins, trying all kinds of things, even sometimes trying the Hakuna Matata to try to convince yourself there's no cares and no worries, but you keep having cares and worries that break through into awareness. So this amnesia, this idea of forgetting the Creator, forgetting the Source, believing that you can make yourself instead of accepting yourself as a creation of a perfect source, of spirit source, this results in sleep, this results in amnesia, this seemingly results in ignorance, in forgetting. And then the Lion King movie is so beautiful about the past. Past is gone, and remember the truth. And this movie we're going to watch is a beautiful example of pray, listen, and follow. Prayer is the medium of miracles. Prayer is the power and the mechanism that unites us with the Holy Spirit, unites us with Jesus, unites us with the Creator. And the prayer is the prayer of our heart, our desire of our heart. What do we want? What is our desire? And we have to activate that desire in order to aim that desire at remembering God. And this movie is a beautiful, beautiful demonstration of that. The movie is called Mully, and the main character is Charles Mully. So we're going to see basically a movie of his life, except it's actually him in the movie, his wife in the movie, his children in the movie. The scenes are going to be taking place in Kenya, and start off with the slums of Nairobi, Kenya. And it's very interesting for me the way these movies seem to come. I've been praying for days for just a very deep, profound movie experience that I could share with you. And then the morning of the day that I watched the movie, I received actually a call came in from Nairobi, Africa, kind of a foreshadowing what would come to me, and then later in the day, the movie. And then afterwards, a conversation with the pastor who had tried to call me in the morning, who said his church is right in the slums of Nairobi. So we're going to start off with our opening scene in the movie is the slums of Nairobi, Kenya, Africa. What's so helpful about this movie is that we start to get a deeper experience through Charles's experiences as we see scenes from his life, and we start to get this sense that we have to begin to face feelings that we have pushed away. And those feelings, in terms of the human condition, are often betrayal and abandonment and rejection. So as we go through the human life cycle, seeming life cycle, those emotions of betrayal and abandonment and rejection come up, and we associate them with different experiences that we have in the world, different interpretations that we have. But what we're learning more and more is that to believe in this world, to believe in the perception of this world, it requires an underlying belief in separation from God, which the Lion King was showing us, the belief that God has been murdered. If God is pure love, and you have an experience that's not pure love, then that's the same as believing God is not God. And it may sound a bit extreme to talk about murdering God, but if we could just define that as believing God is not God, that there's something other than God, that is what the murder is. It's a pushing out of awareness of the divinity of our source and our true being. So that's a beautiful setup for this movie, because Charles is going to have to pray his way, as we all do, through this experience of this world. Also, he will receive his inner messages, and he will follow. And a lot of times when people talk about spiritual awakening, they don't really go into the topic of prayer and how important prayer is, or listening and guidance. And finally, the following. You have to follow the guidance that's given. And the main character in this movie, this is all based on actual events that he experienced. All of the experiences are coming from this inner prayer, this inner connection with God. There are sometimes teachers that don't emphasize prayer and don't emphasize actually guidance, and therefore don't actually emphasize following guidance. But those three aspects of pray, listen, and follow are absolutely essential. And to fully wake up from this dream, you have to really grasp the power of prayer and the power of the mind. You have to really believe and have faith in guidance, whether it's an inner voice that you hear or intuitions and feelings, something that nudges you and nudges you and nudges you along the way. You have to really believe and have faith in those nudges, in those instructions, in those pointers. And then, most importantly, you have to follow. It wasn't too long ago, on October 4th, when Francis passed away, when people ask me of my experiences of knowing Francis, I say, well, she was very deeply devoted and in faith with the power of prayer. Francis prayed. Francis truly prayed and prayed and prayed. And then when Francis received her instructions, she did not hesitate in following the instructions. Did Francis believe in guidance? Yes, she did. Did Francis believe in prayer? She did. And did Francis follow the guidance that was given to her? She did. And that's where the joy came from. That's where the presence, the laughter came from. That's where the giggles came from. All of that, look at the gifts of that. All of that came from praying and listening and following. And if you knew nothing about anything else, if you just had the faith in that and were willing to give yourself wholeheartedly to that, then you would see how simple everything unfolds just from that prayer and that listening and that following. You don't need anything else. You don't need formulas. You don't need complex structures. You don't need complex disciplines. It's really very, very, very simple. It's like the Bible saying, and a little child shall lead them. It's very, very simple. And that's the greatness of the movie we're going to watch. We're going to see a true story, as stories go in this world. It's something that just unfolds and unfolds moment by moment, and we will go on the adventure with Charles Mully. And I think the value of demonstration is more important than anything else. In other words, if you have high ideals, you can still hold them as apart from yourself, and you can put those ideals in the future. But if you have principles in your heart, and you just decide to live those principles and follow those principles right now, you just make that decision, I'm just going to follow these deep principles in my heart, then you will quickly discover that the obstacles that you believed were there will disappear. The walls that seem to be blocking will crumble and fall. And everything that seemed to be a challenge will quickly melt away in the faith of following what's in your heart in this moment. That the power is right there, right in the here and now, and then everything else just flows from that activation of the power of prayer. Prayer is a way of knowing God. Prayer is a way of waking up. Prayer is the most practical essence that you will ever come in contact with. And when I was watching this movie, my eyes were wide, and I noticed some tears rolling down the cheeks, and I kind of visualized Gandhi and Mother Teresa and St. Francis above me, and I visualized Mother Teresa was crying. She was like, oh my, Mother Teresa crying at what she's beholding. Because Mother Teresa was always talking about love in action. You can't separate the love from the action that pours from it. And Jesus, of course, was a beautiful demonstration of that. Gandhi was a demonstration of the peacefulness, the nonviolence, the dedication, the devotion. And then there's St. Francis, you know. Some of you know the story of St. Francis, and some of you have watched the movie Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon, maybe quite a few times, and had tears of joy at that. Recently, Sam was talking about some of the communications he's had with some family members, relatives, and how intense it's been. And some of you remember the intensity that St. Francis went through with his family. Deborah's turning, looking at me. She's had some intense encounters that seem to be with the family members. And St. Francis was known for his deep devotion to God and going for what he was called to do. And then basically he seemed to be disowned by his family. And when he came back with his bare feet and walking in the rain with his begging bowls, he went to visit them, and the doors were all closed shut. There was no welcome there. And for many people who go on the spiritual journey, this can be a big challenge or a sticking point. It's the idea that you're letting somebody down, that you're turning away from somebody, that you're turning towards something that you feel called to go to in your heart, and yet the haunting beliefs of guilt, that you've done something wrong, that you've let somebody down, that you turned away, that you didn't fulfill an expectation or an obligation that you should have. Those are pretty common on the spiritual journey. I know Mellie's had her son, and that's been a thing too. It's emotions coming up from that. And this is Mully. And this is Mully to start to show us that what we have been perceiving with our five senses is a trick. And this trick involves the projection of the ego, and the ego is the belief in specialness. The ego is the belief in special love. The ego is the belief that love can be fragmented into bodies. It can be compartmentalized into close ones, beloveds, or people that we're indifferent with, or people that we've called enemy. It's the belief that love can be partial. And Jesus is teaching us that love is whole. You cannot know love except by knowing the love of God. In fact, a workbook lesson, he says, there is no love but the love of God. Love is one. And if you don't know it as one, then you don't know it. And so when our eyes have been accustomed to this world, when our five senses have showed us this world, all of our seeming lifetime, we don't have an experience of the falsity of the perception. And because we take for granted that what has been presented to us, the world of time and space, is real, we just don't see that is part of the amnesia, that in linear time there never was love, that the world was made to cover over love, to hide love, that love is universal, love is unconditional, and love cannot be partitioned. One way we could look at it too metaphysically is that we could say that God is our parent, but that parent is a single parent. It's a single parent, it's a spirit. And our identity is spirit, and we can only know our parent, our source, our creator as single. And yet the world, the word parent oftentimes is used in the plural, parents. We're used to parents in the idea of two parents, biological parents, of males and females, of sperms and eggs, of duality and multiplicity. And when we're accustomed to duality and multiplicity and fragmented perception, then what is real and true, the reality of spirit, is completely blocked from awareness. You cannot know this dualistic projection and this multiplistic projection and know God. So those are the ideas that we've been exposed to with the Course in Miracles, but thanks to our good friend Charles Mully, he's going to take us on a trip today that's going to be an experiential trip. We're going to go with him to transcend specialness and open up into holiness. Easy to talk about, but when we come to experiences, it seems like they seem to be like a hurdle. Like people have told me, they say, I think it's impossible to love everyone. And that seems to be like a huge goal, to be able to love everyone, and yet that seems to be our only goal, our task that Jesus has given to us, is cheering us on, saying, you may think it's impossible to love everyone, but I assure you that it's possible. And now I'm going to show you the beloved Charles as he takes us on a journey from specialness to holiness, from abandonment, rejection, betrayal, to wholeness, completion, happiness, and joy. Wow, what a journey. and only in 1 hour and 21 minutes. That's a ride. That's a speedy ride from specialness to holiness. So I'll pop in from time to time, but I think you'll see why I had so many tears watching this movie, because I was going, wow. Wow, wow, wow. I like to see the journey, the actual demonstration of the journey from specialness to holiness. That's, when you see a way shower like this, you can't help but have your heart feel lifted up. You can't help but feel transported into like a unified awareness, because what you've just beheld is undeniable as witness, as evidence. He's going to start off without mighty companions, but just like in The Lion King, in the end, on Pride Rock, there was Simba and Rafiki, there was the whole gang, the new little cub coming there with Rafiki holding him up, and there was Timon and Pumbaa, and the mighty companions are all there. And that's what we're going to see in this movie. We're going to see it go all the way through the mighty companions, and he's going to just keep collecting mighty companions as he goes along. Also, this movie is going to involve orphans. And after this movie, I was just reflecting, thinking, wow, we have 7.8 billion orphans on this planet. Because an orphan is one that is not aware of the parent. And it's not parents, they're orphans because human beings have a creator in spirit that they're unaware of. And so it's to imagine 7.8 billion orphans walking around. And what do you do with that situation of a planet of the orphans instead of planet of the apes? We're dealing with the planet of the orphans. People talk about, the homeless, the streets of the big cities that have homeless. What? These are all orphans. We got 7.8 billion orphans that are all homeless, all believe there's something that they are not, all come without a self and make one as they go along, and that doesn't go very well, and all who've forgotten home, who've forgotten heaven and spirit, and literally point the finger at people laying on the streets of San Francisco as homeless, not realizing that they themselves are homeless and wandering, lost in time and space, in a fictitious imagining that God didn't create and doesn't even know about. So sit back, enjoy the ride, and enjoy Mully. I think for all of us, most of us will be seeing this for the first time, but Jesus sent us this one. It's like a sweet Christmas present from Jesus. So here we go. So he's reached his St. Francis moment, where St. Francis had an illuminating experience, and then he basically told his parents, told his friends, told everyone, and they pretty much reacted as the wife and the children, and including the geek. That's just total madness. Just total madness. Absolutely unbelievable that somebody would say that at dinner and then go on and on about, I'm going to help the poor, all the things that St. Francis had talked about, all the things that Jesus had talked about. Sell everything that you have, give to the poor, and follow me. Seek the kingdom of heaven first, and all else will be added unto you. It's like a turn in the mind from the belief of trying to do it the world's ways. And you could see he actually went from feeling totally abandoned and life was totally meaningless, and then step by step things started going good, and he thought, He was very enterprising. It got better, 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 better. But there always comes a point, in his case, where he just felt so sick and so bad. And he didn't really know why. He just was kind of like, why are you bringing me down? Why are you bringing me back to poverty? Why would you turn me back to poverty? And what we learn from Jesus is that poverty is a state of mind. Poverty has nothing to do with the material world. Poverty, Jesus tells us in the Course, is ego thinking. So you could seem to be rich in the world and be very poor if you have ego thinking and belief. One time, you might remember in the St. Francis movie where he was out and they were just helping some farmers, and one of the farmers said, "Let's give them some to eat," to the Franciscans. And then another one had a huge reaction and said, These are the sons of landowners. And St. Francis answered, "We are all poor in the eyes of our Lord," meaning, again, if we're believing in ego, if we're following the wrong voice, that's where the poverty is. So for him, it was the big hit. The first big hit was like, oh my gosh, it's not to be found in the making of money. And so he just matter-of-factly announces that he will never work for money again. He's going to sell everything. He's going to work for the poor, for the orphans, for those that he's seeing. And this is what Jesus meant in the Bible by take the stranger in. He said when he looked into the eyes of the hardened young man there, he said, I saw myself, I saw faces of myself. It just was a moment of starting to realize that there's nothing really apart from me. I'm just seeing myself. I'm seeing myself when this man's expressing hatred. He's got these dark, kind of cold eyes, this meaninglessness. He said, just like I'm seeing myself. So at this point, this is the turning point where you have to see that you don't have different separate interests from anyone, and yet that point of divergence, of turn, is going to be the big point in the mind for the awakening, because this is the point where you basically are turning away from everything you believed before. The past is gone, like Rafiki said. It's gone. And now let's just watch him as he just is very matter-of-fact in kind of announcing this. Because when you have that experience, when St. Francis had that experience, and here when Charles had that experience, it's not going to always be perceived as a popular choice by the world. Remember, the ego made the world. So this is a choice to turn away from the thinking of the world and open to a new thought system, to new guidance. And then the remnants of the unconscious darkness are going to be around. It's a lot of mixed messages. You get some miracle messages, and then you get some really dark messages like, you're crazy, it's nuts, you've lost your way. And that's the turn of beginning to turn away from the ego belief system, from the poverty of ego thinking to a new way of thinking and believing. It's just starting. It's just starting. It's not ending, it's just starting. But this is the example of the dismantling of perception. When you feel put out by somebody who left the light on, when you feel put out when somebody didn't flush the toilet, when there's a toothbrush there with toothpaste, and you go, that's just rude. It's the dismantling of perception. When you give yourself over to the Spirit, you can know for sure that the perception will start to be dismantled. Your mind will be unwound. Even at the end of Lion King, I noticed for the first time, I've seen the movie many times, I noticed at the very end it was called The Path of Unwinding. I was like, never saw that. At the very end, the path of unwinding, in the circle of life, in the swirling circle of energy, of love inside from the Holy Spirit, unwind the mind, unwind. It's the first time I saw the path of unwinding at the end of Lion King in the circle of life. So it's the perception that seems to be ordered. There seems to be a sense before the kids start coming in of order in the house. There have been people in monasteries, I remember nuns that would say things like, cleanliness is close to godliness. And yet, when you say yes to the calling, that is giving your mind permission to be dismantled. Perception is a judgment. It's an ordering of the world based on values that the ego has set up in the mind. So what people think of as their everyday normal perception of, this is how I like my life, this is how I prefer my life to be, the preferences are part of the ego system. And the preferences have got to go because there aren't any in the kingdom of heaven. Heaven is just pure love and oneness. So the preferences are the judgments. The judgments aren't just the negative end of the spectrum. The preferences are the whole spectrum. So you can see, particularly at the first dinner table when he announced he would never work for money again, he would be giving to the poor, he would be helping poor children and everything. You could see the faces on his wife and the children. They were like shocked and disgusted. And now you can see as he moves forward with his pray, listen, and follow, you can see on the faces of the children, like they're breaking things. They're stones. They're breaking windows, things. And this is just the dismantling of perception that will inevitably come when you say yes to God. It has to fall apart first before the new perception can be shown, can be given. This is what we talk about, getting flushed out of ego comfort zones. You can see the children. Our house, they were in our house. We started sharing rooms, and then there was some more, and they were playing, and they were throwing things, and then she said, then there were hundreds, and then you can see the gates are open. He is got a big heart. I mean, Mother Teresa used to pick up a few kids here and there every day. He's opening the floodgates. And what is going down is the self-concept. Because you know what Jesus says, all things work together for good. There are no exceptions except in the ego's judgment. The ego doesn't like the dismantling because the ego made this world. The ego sponsors this world. Perception, Jesus says, is a mirror, not a fact. Perception is not a fact. And if it's not a fact, you know it's going to get washed away because God is the fact. Love is the fact. That's reality. So everything that seems to be washing away, dismantling, unwinding is part of it. That's the ego is going to kick, it's going to scream, it's going to holler. Jesus says in the Manual for Teachers, in the stages of the development of trust, one of the stages starts with, it will seem as if things are being taken away from you. There it is. You can see it right there. And the kids are flooding in, and it seems to his biological family, to his children, like their life as they've known it. Looking forward to those holidays, looking forward to those parties, looking forward to all those things. They became accustomed to what they called, we have a good life. We are influential, one of the kids said. And now you can see that as he answers his call, there's a dismantling of perception. I don't think that he's seeing it the way his children are. I think he's probably having so much fun bringing bread in his Mercedes, bringing home kids, 1, 2, 3, 4, 100 kids. He's probably like, wee, ooh, ah, wee, another one, and another, and another, and another. You know, talk about taking the stranger in. We saw how he started off when he was knocking on doors and he had no family, and he was walking around as one of the orphans, feeling life is meaningless, I have nothing to do. Now the switch has been flipped in his mind. He's got a strong case of Mother Teresa-itis, and it's getting worse. It's a stronger case every day. The more people, the more he brings in, the more glee and joy he has. And you can see with the biological family, oh yeah, they're disturbed. They're disturbed, all right. They're like, he's crazy, he's lost it. What's happening to us? What happens when the money runs out, and so on and so forth. It's all the fears and doubts, but that's just the ego coming up. It's getting flushed out of its hiding place, and it's being brought to the surface very rapidly. So I tell you, it's not even begun. This is not going to come to an abrupt halt. It's just, in the alphabet, we're just in the ABCs here. He has, as the carpenters say, we've only just begun. But that's the beauty of it, because that's what expands your faith. When the ego is flushed out of its unconscious comfort zones, it's not happy. But it's never happy. It's a death wish. Do you expect a death wish to be happy? The ego will judge the process of spiritual awakening very negatively. And it could be in your own mind where you're doubting, what have I done? Will I ever be able to go back and have a normal life? Can I even go back? Is there anything to go back to? You know those thoughts like, oh my God, my plan Bs are starting to feel farther away. Where are they? My plan B, C. Are you back there? Are you still back there? Because you start to feel like that Shirley MacLaine movie, Out on a Limb. Like the more you follow the Spirit, you feel like you're more out on a limb of trust, of faith. And you can see seems to be quite enjoying it. He's not slowing down. And of course, the backlash, the ego backlash will hit when the children, his biological children, will start to get much more verbally aggressive with this. Some of you remember the movie Evan Almighty, when he starts to follow God and build an ark. And then when he's shown on the floor of Congress, they're saying, who told you to do these things? And his wife's going, don't. Say it on television, don't. And his children are like, don't, Dad, please, no. Who instructed you to do this? Who's telling you to do this? And he says, it was God. And then his secretary, or the woman, the black woman, she's like, okay, better get the resume ready for the next job. She's like, that's it, you've crossed over. And we know how it is with the God word. When we share the God word in certain situations, people are like raising eyebrows. Oh, right. Oh, you're one of those holy rollers. Oh, good. That's what you're doing with your life. Good luck with that. But you can see he's just getting revved up here. Jackson, are you enjoying this? There we go. You're ready to unwind. Here you go. You got a role model. Okay, yes, that's it. All right, here we go. He's just getting started. He's just getting started. He's only just begun. Now he's getting teenagers. He's going back for double dipping. He scoops them up as orphans, works with them, and then when they go off to sniff glue or do something, he goes back out in his truck and he starts scooping up again, bringing them again and again. You can see the circumstances too, moving when they didn't have space, moving out to a very dry land, very, very arid and dry. And that's the thing about the spiritual journey, as long as you're interpreting the world through the ego filter of the five senses, there will be many temptations along the way, and doubt thoughts will come up. What's this? Things are getting worse. Oh, why am I being put through this? Why am I being put through that? But remember what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the pure of heart, for they shall see God. The prayer of the heart has to be to transcend the interpretations of the ego, the five senses of the world. What happens when I feel pain, when I feel suffering? What happens when I feel discomfort? Jesus is telling us in the Course, he says, the body doesn't feel. The mind tells the body what to feel. That's why it's a course in mind training. So the mind training has to persist, even through the interpretations of the ego. Something's gone wrong. Where is it going to go? And so they're moving out to this place where they have more room. They definitely have more space. It's just dry, arid space, very, very dry. And that's just a good example about how when you follow the guidance is to wash away all judgments of the world, all comparisons. The guidance is to pull you out of this false sense of ego comfort zone. I think back in the parable of David, even though I was extremely shy, the best thing for me would be to have to go out and travel. If you're shy, the worst thing you can think of is going and traveling and speaking. If you're shy and you don't like to travel, it's like we learned from the Revolver movie, where you don't want to go, that's where you'll find him. That's where you'll find the ego, where you don't want to go, where you personally don't want to go, where you personally feel like you have a hold on, this is what I want from my life, these are the preferences I want, this is the way I want it to look, these are the people I want to have in my life. And when you start to say, these are the people I want, and I don't want to be around those other people or those kind of people, then interestingly enough, the circumstances come. So it's like having a dog put its nose in the poop. You do get to face the judgments in the mind. Because it's all the mind. Wherever you go, your mind goes with you. There's just the mind. The mind is so powerful. And everything, Jesus says, everything that seems to happen to me, I ask for and receive as I have asked. So prayers are always answered. Whatever we're perceiving in terms of likes and dislikes, that's the answer to prayer. Whatever we're perceiving into the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, those are the answer to prayer. We're just perceiving our thoughts. And at some point, you just have to say, wow, my faith is expanding, and I'm starting to realize that I want to release these thoughts, the good, the bad, the right, the wrong, the beautiful, the ugly, the good preferences, the bad preferences. You start to realize that only a clean mind, only a mind emptied of all these ego thoughts will know peace. And that's why it just takes faith. That's why you can see with Mali, his whole journey is just expanding faith, expanding faith. Even when the kids go back to the streets to sniff glue or prostitution or whatever they're doing, his wife is saying, we're very sad when they left. And yet you see him, he gets in his pickup truck and drives by with all these, now they're like teenagers, they're young adults, and you see his smiling face like, I got him. I got a bunch of, take the stranger in, take the stranger in, take the stranger in. Don't push it away. Don't push it away. Don't try to judge it, label it, and then dismiss it. Because projection, what Jesus tells us is projection is the attempt to get rid of something that you don't want. Projection, that's how this world arose. It was an attempt to get rid of something that you don't want by seeing it as if it's outside of you. A convenient trick. But as they say, by the grace of God, there go I. You're always looking at your thoughts. You dislike something, Jesus says, pluck that dislike from your mind. You prefer some outcome or some form to be a certain way. Jesus is like, okay, pluck that. Let me pluck that from your mind. let me pluck the things you think are good, as well as let me do some weeding of the things that you judge against, all of them. And that's what this movie is really showing, because you see scene after scene, you can see Mully's smiling face. He's just going along. Okay, what's next? What have we got next? What have we got next? And what's so beautiful is that expands the faith. So now the next thing that they're facing is him and his wife, all these kids, they've moved to this place that's kind of more isolated, but it's also very, very, very dry. And they're facing all the things. I mean, our community went through the pandemic. We had to just navigate the pandemic day by day, moment by moment, prayer by prayer. There was a time when they came to me at the temple and they said, well, the governor of Jalisco has issued an edict, a declaration. I said, what was it? And they said, well, if you're 60 years or older, you are confined to the house. You cannot go out. I was like, oh, okay, this body's over 60. I had so much fun being confined, because you can confine a body, but you can't confine a mind. If you look at Gandhi was in prison. I think it was about two-thirds of the years of his life. Gandhi was in prison, and he always said, the happiest times of my life. He was in there doing his journals, writing, exchanging vegetarian recipes with the guards and the prisoners. It shows you that everything is a state of mind, that you can confine a body, but you can't confine a mind that wishes to be free. And what we're learning is the purpose. It's the purpose of forgiveness that brings us the joy. There's great joy in seeing the false as false. There's great joy. That's where all the laughter comes from. That's where all the smiling faces come from. Not from being circumstance dependent, like, oh, how will I judge these circumstances? Are they good? Are they bad? Are they favorable? Are they unfavorable? That's just the ego, tick, 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 just judging anything, and judging everything based on its filter. Okay, we keep going here. He's just rolling along now, just rolling along from scene to scene. Yeah, that's kind of where our ministry is now with AI. Before we were digging for water, and then things can open up kind of rapidly. After they struck the water, then they got into having a well, then a water purification system, and then farming, building more, planting trees. It just seems to go exponentially. But it often comes very quickly. You could see where some of them were saying, I'm not digging. This is like digging. We hit a rock. His own son said, we hit a rock. This is the spot. You said, yeah, keep digging. But then it can flip. And that's the experience in the mind, that when you keep the faith and you keep the faith and you keep the faith, then things can start to seem to open up in your heart and your mind exponentially. We've, even in the past year, we had a 12-day retreat at the monastery, mystical experience. Yiska had a mystical experience. Ivan had one, was that a couple of days ago? The exponential things that come, it comes just from keeping the faith and letting go of all doubt thoughts. And you could see that's what was happening with the digging for the water. They felt it, they went out, they prayed, they heard the voice, where to turn, they went to the spot. And even though everything in form would say, this is ridiculous, they said they even attempted to dig wells like 100 feet down in the same area, and they found nothing. And here they were digging by hand and still relatively on the surface, and then that's where they found it. They found the water there through guidance. That again shows it's pray, listen, and follow. It's not based on analysis. It's not based on past learning. It's not based on anything of the past. Jesus says, let present trust direct the way. And that's what this movie is really showing. It's just one thing after the next. Let present trust direct the way. Present trust direct the way. It wasn't too long ago. I remember we had this, our monastery land, and I remember I was there, and we decided to dig for water, hire somebody to dig for water in the campground. And so he finally came out and he got his truck, and I forget exactly what, but it was like hundreds of dollars for every foot that he would go down. And so they drilled and drilled, down and down. They drilled and drilled and drilled. And they drilled in the morning, and I kept saying, how's it going? No, we're not striking water. So finally, they kept drilling on. They would ask me, well, you want to go another 50 feet? You want to drill? And I said, yeah. I walked up to the kitchen up there at the monastery, and I walked in. Everybody had their bowls and their plates of food, and I said, now I always say, don't pray for form and don't pray for outcomes. But right now, everybody pray for water. And within like 4 minutes, we hit the water. And it's all a testimony to the power of the mind. That's all it is. It's always just bringing the mind back to the power of the mind and to the power of thoughts. Because the realizations in the end have to be, okay, I have invented the world I see, and the power of decision is my own. I am responsible for what I see. I choose the feelings I experience, and I decide upon the goal I would achieve. And everything that seems to happen to me, I ask for and receive as I have asked. Well, you can see that is the end of victimization. That is the end of mistreatment. That is the end of poor me. Poor me. That is the end of why do bad things happen to good people. That is the end. That wipes everything out. If I regain and remember the power of the mind and I choose to forgive, then Jesus is saying that's exactly how you see the world differently. If you have people that seem to be naysayers in your life, if you can just say, oh, wow, great, thank you, Jesus. You're helping me discover a few more doubt thoughts that I was holding on to and hiding from you. That's the way to look at it, is just give over the doubt thoughts that come to mind. Don't make something of them. Don't build a case for stopping your search for God, or you're stopping your attempt to remember God based on a few doubt thoughts that come up. Recently, somebody told me that they said, my husband is telling me that my unconscious doubt thoughts are attacking him. I thought, well, now I've heard it all. And then she said, and that's that moment I got so angry. I felt like killing him when he said that my unconscious doubt thoughts were attacking him. She said, I felt like killing him at that moment. But it's always bringing up the flushing into awareness, the belief in attack. God didn't create attack. Lesson number 23 in the workbook, I can escape the world I see by giving up attack thoughts. That's the culmination of, after the first 22 lessons, some of the most profound lessons in the whole workbook, he basically leads his way up to, oh, and by the way, here, number 23, I can escape from the world I see by giving up attack thoughts. He's just given the key to eternity. He's just dropped in lesson number 23. And he reinforces it by saying, lesson number 5, I'm never upset for the reason I think. He reinforces it by saying, anger is never justified. And then one paragraph later in the text, he says, pardon is always justified. How's that for two lead-off sentences for paragraphs? Anger is never justified, and then pardon is always justified. Because forgiveness is a gift to yourself. It's really your mind, giving your mind a Christmas present. When you give up the grievance, when you give up the judgment, when you give up the doubt thought, you're just saying, Merry Christmas, mind, I'm giving you a gift here. I'm actually letting go of this grievance and going to accept joy in place of it. That's the gift, that not a material gift that we're asked to give, but we're asked to give ourselves the mental gift, to give everyone and everything the same mental gift of the release of judgment. And that's why you could summarize all of Jesus' teachings into 2 words, judge not. And he's saying not because you shouldn't, it's because you weren't created to judge. You were never created to judge, so you're just giving yourself a gift when you give it up. You're not really sacrificing anything, you know. Even the sacrifice word, what is the real meaning of sacrifice? In the Manual for Teachers, he flips it around. He says sacrifice is the giving up of what you want. What, O teacher of God, do you want? You have been called by God to the most glorious calling that could be, which is to forgive. Would you sacrifice the call? So he's just saying, you either answer the call or you sacrifice the call. That's a way to turn it around and say, wait a minute, I'm not going to deny my inner calling anymore. I'm going for it. So here we go. We get to see in leaps and bounds now. Jesus says in the Course, miracles fall like healing rain on a dry and thirsty desert. The signs of life spring up. Let's watch Kenya go from desert to green. So this is beautiful because, as you know, I've kind of gone around the United States, Canada, and the world for decades. And it was beautiful because sometimes I would go from course group to course group, and people would basically be putting down a lot of Christians in course groups, putting down Mother Teresa, and saying things in the course group like, don't they understand? No, it's a perceptual problem. It's a perceptual problem. The problem isn't the disease, the problem isn't the hunger, the problem isn't the homelessness, the problem isn't the poverty, it's a perceptual problem. And then I would go back a year later and they would say, it's a perceptual problem. And they would tell me about all their issues and all their struggles. And I'd go back the next year. We know it's a perceptual problem, but we're struggling with this. And finally I had to just say after like 4 or 5 trips, maybe you have to admit that admitting that it's a perceptual problem is the key. You have to go inside to a point through guidance. These were also people that were saying, we're just going to read the book and keep practicing the lessons year after year, 10, 20 years. But this, you're starting to see, like with Mother Teresa, she always talked about love in action, that you cannot deny the prayer part of A Course in Miracles. You cannot deny the guidance part of the Course in Miracles. You cannot just put it into some kind of intellectual thought system and start to pontificate and try to speak and write books and do workshops and retreats on something until you have a transformation of consciousness that begins with an actual admission that it's a perceptual problem. Until you've actually taken all the perceived problems that seem to come through the ego's filter of the 5 senses, and you start to pull them all back and come closer to an admission that I have a perceptual problem and I need help. That's where the prayer starts. That's where the activation starts. You don't reach consistent peace of mind, consistent joy and happiness while you're still trying to define the problem in terms of the specifics and the form. You don't come to Lesson 79, let me recognize the problem so it can be solved, and then Lesson 80, let me recognize the problem has been solved. It's the 79 that takes the real willingness to let go of the past learning that previously defined the problems. Whether it's, you say, I have relationship issues, or I have issues with my family, or I have issues with the government, or I have issues with these policies, or I have issues with these behaviors or those behaviors. In the end, it's the purification of the heart where you have such a desire in your heart to hear only one voice that you're willing to give up the desire to project. Like Jesus says, don't project the error to time. That's the temptation, is to project it. But what I love about this movie is this is a demonstration. You can see it. You can see that this is pray, listen, and follow in action. It's a living demonstration of that, where it's just like, okay, here's what we're dealing with now. What are we hearing? What are we hearing? What do we need to do? This is showing that guidance is actually the way out. And the way out of the projection, of thinking that something in the world needs to change. Something would be better if it was different. So I love this reflection because it's just showing the power of prayer and the power of, we have in our mind, we have the ability to choose again. But it starts with an admission. We have to really start to accept that this is a mental problem. So we've been dealing with mental illness, and the way out of mental illness is guidance, and it works. It really works. Wow! Praise God for everyone who has listened and followed that guidance, and has not looked outside for that guidance, but has just listened and taken it inside and said, "This is what I'm feeling, and this I shall do." Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah. We had a Chautauqua recently, and Anna, you were saying, I want to be done through. I want to be done through. And I think this is a beautiful answer to the prayer. The miracle works completely at all seeming levels. All levels of perception. It just like radiates and ripples out like a stone hitting a pond. The ripples, the rings and ripples that go out. And because miracles work at all levels, ultimately it's because that really time is simultaneous and everything's happening simultaneously. That's why it ripples out that way. But it also is telling us that you really, really, really have to be true to the guidance and to following the guidance and stay in touch with your heart. You have the guidance inside of you, and you really have to be sincere and honest in following that. And you can see that was so great about Charles. He listened, he prayed, he listened, and he followed. And then the Spirit was able to use the body of Charles like a puppet, in ways that he couldn't even fathom or imagine. And we can see them all in this movie. It's just packed into this movie. But it's showing us that pray, listen, and follow allows for the action component. And it basically is saying, let your actions be under the guidance of Jesus and the Holy Spirit. That's when you'll feel the harmony of being done through. So the prayer of the heart always comes first. You have to be so authentic in really praying and really tuning into your joy and into your inspiration. for Charles, he's followed what the Bible said. With God, all things are possible. So he just was knocking on doors. He had not a cent in his pocket. He followed, and then suddenly, pretty quickly, he's a millionaire. And he's even into oil and gas, starting off with taxis, and then before you know it, he's into oil and gas, and he's probably a multimillionaire. And then he has this encounter with this boy in the street where he really starts to see him. He sees the faces of himself and this boy, and then he just drives in his car, and he doesn't even know where he's driving to. He just drives and drives and drives. That's like him praying. He's just praying and not even knowing where he's driving. He's just praying and praying and praying and praying. And then he breaks down. He really kind of has to surrender to God, and because he feels sick, he feels heartbroken, he feels he's questioning God. Why would you take me back to poverty? Because I think he starts to feel his calling in that car. And part of that calling is, you're never going to work for money again. You're never going to work for reciprocity. And you're going to sell everything that you have. And he's probably thinking, why are you taking me back into poverty? Because he's associated money with abundance, and poverty with lack of money. But really, that whole definition is off too. So it just shows you how deep we have to go when we just say yes to this, and how then you can start to feel the actual love in action. Then you don't have to try to go toward or avoid anything in form, because you start to actually lose track of the passage of time. That's how you know when you're really letting go of the doer. When you lose track of the passage of time, that's when you're surrendered. Because time is the trick. It's only thoughts of the past, regrets, grievances, things of the past memories that are temptations, and also the future. If we honestly think that we know what the future will be, maybe we went to a psychic, maybe we had a tarot reading, maybe it was something, maybe we have set our minds so firmly on ambitions of how our worldly life should look, how our personhood should look, then those are blocks to the Spirit as well. That you really have to be led moment by moment. When Jesus says, let present trust direct the way, he knows that's the only way you can let go of past learning. You can't cling to some past learning and hope that you'll be happy. Because like Rafiki, when Rafiki smacked Simba over the head, it was saying it's the past. You got to let it go. That was like the moment when he was actually had the confidence to go back and be done through. And he didn't even know what that was going to be. He didn't even know how he was going to do it, but Narla joined him, and then Timon and the warthog, they all joined in when he said yes, when he said, I'm going to do this. Fearlessly heading back, And still the jokes continued, after they get back and they get back and it's all bleak and dark and black, Timon's like, oh, that's great. This is why we've come back, to save this. And, still the jokes come, but that's like just a lighthearted way to remind us, keep it light. Don't take anything too seriously. It's all handled. It's really out of our hands. We are just to rejoice and be glad, and then let that joy and that gladness kind of ripple out in whatever form it's going to take. It's out of our hands. We're not in charge. We've been having these summits. How many have we had so far? Two summits. And the last summit we had, I was talking a lot in that meeting, a pretty long meeting, where I was saying that when you start to trust and when you have faith, you start to realize everything is handled. So your fears and concerns about lack and scarcity start to disappear. And that's just the beginning symptom of spiritual awakening, when your concerns about lack and poverty and where's it going to come from? You know, for many human beings, they do live their lives, their entire parables out with this one thought going is, how am I going to survive? And then when that is the central question revolving in your mind, like a tumbler going around in your mind, then you just drift from job to job, from place to place, and you're in survival mode, survival of the body. And Jesus is just there always saying, you don't ask for too much, you ask for far too little. When you ask, please provide for me so my body will survive, Jesus is saying, I think you can do better with your prayer. I don't think you want to stay at that level of prayer, because you can't go beyond the level that you believe in, if you believe in this scarcity. But I think what we're experiencing now is there's a synergy we feel. I felt it too in that AI summit we had. It was like there was a joyful synergy. There were all these witnesses of a team and going and building the beginnings of it. What was it? The monastery? Strawberry Bot. They just spontaneously went to a cafe in Chapala, was it? And a group came together, and suddenly this Strawberry Bot started to emerge. And they felt such joy. And they were sharing words like, it was like none of us were in charge. We were all just making our spontaneous contributions, and then suddenly this Strawberry Bot emerged, and then we were able to see the beginnings of the Strawberry Bot. Just from the night before, the idea came in, let's do it. Laverne said, yeah, let's do this. They gathered there, and there was joy in the room of everybody talking about being used and just being happy to be there, to be connecting, being used together in a collaborative way is really how you move beyond the scarcity and lack thing to higher and higher realms of joy in the mind, where you cease to be concerned about what Jesus calls lower order needs. You know, the whole belief in a hierarchy of needs is what the central problem is. The ego took one thing like scarcity and it spread it out into a rainbow and it called it a hierarchy of needs. And what Jesus is saying is, I need your mind, I need your heart, I need you to speak for me, I need you to let me use the body. I want you to place your body like a puppet under my direction and my control. And if you do that, if you will just let your body, your personality be under Christ's control, I will handle all of your lower order needs. He's basically saying, I'm going to handle all the things that before you were obsessed with. If you will let me run the show, I will handle all those things so you don't have to be obsessed anymore. You don't have to worry. You don't have to go through the day scratching your head. Okay, how am I going to pay that bill? How am I going to handle that thing? How am I going to handle this thing? You see how much energy is put into what Jesus is calling those lower order needs, because basically he's saying you have a higher order need, and that need is for love. You need to remember divine love. That's really your need. All the other stuff is fluff. And he's basically saying, let me handle the fluff so you can get about the higher order need and accepting the atonement, accepting the miracle. So that's why even with Helen Schuckman, who was a research psychologist, she had a lot of fear, she had a lot of resistance. It took 7 years to get A Course in Miracles through her mind and dictated out and through shorthand and then typed out with Bill Thetford. But basically, she still had her scarcity needs going on, and some of you know those stories. She still wanted a Borgana coat, a used Borgana coat. She would only pay so much money for the used Borgana coat in New York City, And Jesus once again said, the miracle works in all levels. I will tell you where to go to get the used organic coat that you want to wear in New York City in the winter. And let's get on with the higher order business. And that's why Jesus does not want us to get too focused on what he calls the minutia, because the minutia is focusing attention on the minutia is how the ego defends against the light. If the ego can get the mind so caught up into all the little things of this world, then the mind will continue to not believe that there is a higher meaning, that there is a higher purpose, that there is something more. It's always going to just be caught in the groundhog loop of time, going round and round and round. Oh, I've got to do this, and I've got this and that. And that was beautiful. Anna brought that up. She said, I need God. I desperately need God. I cannot go on. We can't go on together with suspicious minds. We cannot go higher unless we start to follow the example here of Charles. Charles was like, he was constantly in motion for God. We didn't see him hardly meditating or whatever. He seemed to be quite active in this movie. It was only an hour and 21 minutes, and he was all over the place. He was driving 4 hours to get water for children so they could have something to drink. He was going here, he was going there. He gave us a blazing pathway to start to realize that our purpose is no small thing. I see Micah and Amanda there. I remember when I first was in touch with Amanda, she said, well, I've got a mom. I said, oh, yeah. And she said, I've got 2 daughters. One of them's named Amanda, too. Yeah. They're grown daughters, but still, they're mom. And she said, I have no money for a plane ticket, and da-da-da-da-da. But yet we joined in prayer, and somehow she still came to Mexico, where she met Micah, and off to the races, races to God. There they are, hand in hand, arms up. And the thing about it is, you don't know what the future will look like. None of us do. But we have to be able to follow our heart, to really go for it, and we have to just be open to pray and listen and follow. We've got Wesley and Angie. You guys are our poster children for pray, listen, and follow. Savings in the bank, no. But transparently open whenever they have a need, that's good. If anybody has guilt around doing GoFundMes or anything like this, they will counsel you. Wesley's like, I've been through that. Been through it 100, 200 times. I've been through that. And Jackson, there you are, Jackson. Jackson keeps telling me I have the resources. He said, I'm going to come. I'm coming. And I said, good, we're ready. You bring your happy Rafiki laugh, your squeal of laughter. He recorded for me a voice of his laughter at the highest pitch. He sounds just like Rafiki the monkey. And now the ringtone on my phone is Jackson laughing. And it's also on a loop. So if I don't answer my phone, it just goes circular, loop, 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 loop. If any of you wonder why I'm not answering the phone and you're calling my number, it's because I'm listening to Jackson's laugh over and over and over. And I like to laugh more than answering the phone sometimes. And there's Baba from the Peace House. Hi. In Purpose, she's taking down on a daily basis new songs. She's in a receiving phase of all kinds of new songs and new lyrics. We all know how delicious that is, so we'll just wait to see. But this is so precious. I feel so honored to be able to show a movie of such practice. This is so much practice. It's showing a demonstration. He really wasn't preaching. He wasn't a preacher. In fact, he got expelled from his church not for preaching, but for bringing kids, for bringing orphans into the church that smelled. They basically told him he had to get out. But in the end, they invited him back. You notice how all of his biological children, where were they at the end? They all are positions in his foundation and his thing down there. So they all, just for a moment, were reflecting the doubt thought of, what is this? Nobody does this. This is too far out of the box. This is not acceptable. But even that was just a brief thing. Then they came with some hesitation. I don't know about this thing you're digging for water. Crazy, it's ridiculous. But then when they hit water, okay, I'm going to support my dad from now on. All it took was one miracle like that, and it's like, okay, I'm not a doubter anymore. I'm a believer. So, okay, we'll just open it up. If there's anybody either on Zoom or do we have microphones here? Yeah. Kristen's got a microphone, and Deborah has a microphone here. So even if you just want to just share what you felt about this movie, I think it's a testimony, testify to love.
It's just amazing to see all these synchronicities around Africa. Since I think it was yesterday or the day before, I don't know, it's just been a swirl with Lucy. I went to South Africa and I had this conversation with my mom where she was having all these insights about miracle shifts in her mind. And kind of like the Lion King of being on the throne and seeing herself just chained to the throne and having to, control really everything, like everything she rules. Everything she sees is what she rules, and just controlling that and just releasing it, wanting to get off the throne. And then she ended up joining with Lucy, and they spent the day together, and Lucy was resonating and held the space for her, and they were healing together. And and they also connected with Lynn and Jenny, and then, yeah. And then today, being all about Africa, I can just feel this huge swirl with all of it. It's like the spirit's just so far. The one thing I was thinking was like, it's beyond like my wildest imagination somehow. Like, and I can just feel this healing orchestration so far beyond me. Like, it doesn't involve me, and I'm just really glad about it. Like, it doesn't physically involve me, but around family healings, like I feel those issues getting healed with, just symbols with my dad too, and so this movie is, it's so beautiful, and it answers like a deeper question of just the purpose and and that like that scene where you said, it showed a scene of all of the incredible property that they had built, and it just said, this is real. Like, this is real. This is what's real. When everybody comes together under that one purpose. So it was just so moving to see that. Yeah, and that symbolism of, with Africa, it's almost like a cliche, growing up, it's like, save the African children, and it doesn't seem real even from an American point of view. But the symbolism here was like, go within. Like you can save yourself. You're not a victim. You don't need to look outside yourself for it to be saved. And this was just such a, yeah, like you said, demonstration of that. And it just blew my mind, like the journey that they took, and they didn't go anywhere. And it was just completely beautiful, and just like that was the answer. Just plant trees, dig for water, very simple. Go pick up the children. But then he had that confidence building time of his life too, where he had millions, so he could start with something, and he knew he could do it. But then I was also thinking, like, his greatest weakness became his greatest strength, where he had to go back and face his past. It's just so beautiful. Yeah, so thank you. It's just very deeply touched. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, David.
Yeah, it's so beautiful that when his family just left that night, then he was an orphan. And then at the end of the movie, there he is going with his hat on, calling the name and going out to scoop up more. At the very end, the movie ends the same way. Talk about the circle of life. It's just that beautiful heart just reaching out. And even when Jesus says miracles fall like healing rain on a dry and thirsty desert, that movie was so graphic. But it was almost like they were falling in the mind. The miracles are in the mind, and then the reflections light up, and the world is lush and green, where there was nothing, where there was just dirt, dry dirt. Then everything is so full and green. And I think that's the beautiful thing. It's through that experience, like a lot of us have started to feel the fullness in our life, like our heart starts to fill up, like we're happy to get out of bed in the morning. We're like, ooh, what miracles await me today? Kind of an excitement instead of the old self that we had in the past, which was a dread, like a dread of getting out of bed. Now it's like, ooh, what's there for me? Thank you, Jessica. That's it. It's so huge that you can see that the personal, the Jessica's out of the picture, and it's all just happening way beyond anything that we could imagine. Because I've been getting a lot of those African symbols too, a lot of them. So it's just all around us. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Wesley and Angie, and also Jackson.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, what a beautiful, heartwarming movie. Yeah, a couple of years ago when we left La Casa, it was like all of a sudden all these Indian men added me to Facebook, and all these African men at the same time added me to Facebook. And the Indian men disappeared. I forgave whatever was going on there. And then there was this one African man named David Stengo or something like this. And for 2 years, I've been talking with him, and he runs an orphanage. And I've been watching him build this orphanage over Facebook and go through like trying to get donations and building like whatever buildings they're needing for the orphanage. And the first time it happened was right after I added him. Somehow I knew I needed to like let go of connecting with these other men and just focus on this man. And one day we were in Nahihik at a coffee shop, and it was like Jesus just poured through me. And I just sent him this message that was just like pre-written. I just wrote it. And it's happened a number of times since then. And then there was a boy also from Uganda, and turns out he was in the same city as David. And I was talking to him, and he wanted to finish school, and he was in like 17, and he wanted to finish his last year of school. And I just kept inviting him to pray for the miracle. And then I realized one day in prayer, I'm like, these guys are in the same city. This guy's got an orphanage, and this boy wants to finish school. And so I tried to connect them, and it just never really like worked. And I was like, am I trying to be the doer in this? Am I like trying to look at the form and fix something in the form? But yeah, I just kept going back to inviting inviting them into the prayer. And there was a certain point where, I asked David, like, what did you do with this boy? I heard he had actually blocked him because the boy was being very persistent, and he wasn't very clear with me. So I basically said, like, maybe it's like an invitation to like communicate more, because he was having difficulty in his orphanage and whatever. And so, yeah, I mean, that's kind of where it left off. And the last message the boy sent me was, "I want to start a business," because he was giving up school, letting go of school. And yeah, I mean, it's a reflection. I can see my own thoughts in this from the past. But yeah, it's like I'm seeing this show up. I heard you guys talking about, speaking to Jackson a lot, and some other things. And it's like, okay, well, what is this for me? What's the invitation there? Like, it doesn't seem like a really strong like forgiveness lesson, like, oh, I'm holding a grudge or a grievance or anything like that. I could see maybe there's like, I perceive like African people as different in some way, based on this whole like dialogue of third world country when I was younger. But I don't know what's being asked for here. And this is like, here's this movie, and it's like, wow, this beautiful, like heartwarming experience that's like, yeah, you don't have to deny, the form in this way if you feel your heart, if you feel the guidance. So yeah, I see there's something here, being shown to me, and I'm just not totally clear what that is. So yeah, if you're hearing anything in this, David, that would be really helpful.
Well, your joy is AI. And so, that's your Africa. That's the whole continent for you is AI. And then the gifts come from that, because there's your joy and your inspirations there, and it just radiates out. And again, miracles touch people that we've never met, we're not even aware of. So just your joy with that is radiating out to the whole universe, every day. And we all feel the blessing of that. So it's so beautiful when you find something that calls you and you have passion for, then everybody feels the blessing. We can all feel it. Every time I open a base camp post and I see something you put on there, I kind of, ooh, what's this? What's Wesley found now? He's discovered something here. It was what was it? Something to do with Microsoft Fabric. Yeah, I was in there. Ooh, Microsoft Fabric, and how all your data integrates and all your data streams and data pipelines integrate. I said, oh yeah, Wesley's he's laughing in joy because he's discovering more. And then the blessing comes to everyone who's joining and collaborating in that way. And we have no idea how it will affect or help, but we know that the miracle does ripple across through all of the dimensions of time and space. And just that thought, is a joyful thought. So that's what I'm hearing. Enjoy. Thank you. And Jackson, maybe these people have not heard your laugh yet. I hear it every day on my phone.
Yeah, we can go. We can start with the laughter. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for this movie, because, like, I used to get caught up in such crazy thoughts, like, I would donate to like orphanages or people who are caught up in war and stuff like that. It started small because I would be feeling, okay, this is the money I have and it can take someone to school. I can do this. At first there was happiness doing it. And then slowly I was receiving so many letters and I started doing it because I was feeling guilty. I'm like, oh, how can I refuse to do this? Someone can use this money. Why should I get a new jacket? Let me just do this. It was compromise. It was guilt. And this movie reminded, actually, at one point, I just stopped. And this movie was so good to see that you can do this for love, for joy. This guy was just happy to help these kids. He wasn't feeling guilty at all. It's so good to have that feeling to be. I mean, I was reminded that you can actually just do it for joy, for happiness. That's why I'm so grateful I watched that movie with you guys.
Thank you, Jackson. We feel it. Do it for joy. Here's the Jason has his hand up back there. Okay, I think. Thank you so much. Wasn't that fun? Thank you, thank you, thank you for joining in with us, and yeah, spread the joy, share the joy.